compassion, I think there are two different types of compassion, or two meanings with regard to compassion. So one is where one has strong compassion, one has a strong sense of, upon meeting someone, then there's great compassion when one sees a person having problems and difficulties, that the compassion that arises will lead to the hairs of one's body standing up and tears welling up in the eyes. So there's that type of compassion. And then there's another type where when one, on a higher level actually, when one perceives the problems of another sentient being, one generates an incredible determination to do something. So here in that moment, one doesn't have necessarily a reaction, like a physical reaction with regard to one's eyes welling up with tears and the hairs on one's body standing on end. He's not saying, actually, on a certain level, when one is quite advanced, when the mind of enlightenment, when bodhicitta, or when compassion are working in union with the realization of emptiness, when those two work in combination, then these kind of signs are no longer there. But the determination here, the compassion is much stronger to such a degree that one is willing to give up anything to be able to benefit a person. So it must be a different type of compassion here. One type leading just to these external kind of physical reactions, whereas the other type is like a determination to do something, to really want to do something. So this is the second type here is the one that is in union, that goes in union with the realization.
第两个，那传统掌握用的定金的这个有的了呢，是不是的呢？那都没有。
And so saying that any kind of strong feeling here, that this is influenced by grasping onto pre-existing, grasping onto self. I don't know. I cannot really say that this is the case. I don't know whether that's the case.
Chúng đi chỗ đi Quyên mẹ bị Wang Xie Quyên mẹ bị Wang Bo này kia bị Wang Xie đi chế mà im bạc ta cảm giác chụp thu cái đấy chỉว่า对话đi đấy anh ấy講cái chỉว่าchủ動品質đấy anh ấy thằng cái khi sang nhà mà cái品質松松thanh quý về lúa là tôi bắt đi chế mấy sĩ ba in chỗ cái đấy 네, 또박이 빵보치네, 네 왕세디 제마 임박, 진의 죽두기를 대소자부 된저 송송, 인류 그런 제와디를 풍보 미다바 진배 또박이 제마 임박, 간제스 타주 제두기를, 디 타주 집에 값수 왕세라래 먹고배, 왕세라 먹고배, 개시王谢然莫过吧伊那，安尼lâm rin千莫然后啦，修张蹲家，就没出，然后啦弟弟屯大开人伊那，아니 남린체만 나고라 텐체 송송 미글라 소바 골도 교회 돈学监督 샤바 테니 원숨기 대 뇌수 리주경 대주체기 자와 탈도 반나 원숨 식라 토 괴바 텐체 송송
第五点落，
我点路
都想想那你的金巴马当来没得数呢，金巴当水下到底那下路。
对呀，金巴当。
sikbati dele sajati le chimba madang san tishagi dwa ani madi subshari gashi madi subshari chimba tang chadwa o dina shin chagri le sikdi chazang su ki ma yoma che chega shan la shana ani gowa de loga chadwa diwa gi sik thung di nyam do lo she je sa di ma yoma tu geba ni Judama wan deba indes or tibat.
Basically, she's saying she should read the whole text because if she doesn't, she only gave you a short citation of the text. So if you don't read the end of the text, that would be like if you write on the wall, do not pee here, and someone may just take away the not. So it's a bit like do not pee here, it becomes like do pee here. So this would be like without reading the rest of it, it would be like So anyway, I'm not able to follow because I didn't have my memory from because I'm not able to follow the quote. Anyway, it's very hard for me to understand what she's saying. So I think basically she talks about whether independence on direct perception one is able to gain realization or not. It all comes down to direct perception or not. Anyway, I guess it becomes clear.
燃其究竟根本能力抑制限量。问题问到这边，那我所以刚才翻译呢也只念到必制限量，老师说不可以只念到这，要连下一句也念，就是是一切宗诸宗，也是一切宗诸师共需，要念到这。如果这句没念完的话，就会变成什么呢？明明在墙壁上写的不要尿尿这样子，那没有把这句念完，就像把火去掉，在墙壁上写要尿尿，那这样就会产生误解了。
Tiwati kursare. Ande shindata nengame to kanche chebadi pake umami tawdo chebadi ta tsema shayadi tar ngusum da tubo res tomi shebar. Ta lungdi la odindi doha kangdir tsika ngadi la. Tsawa tar tu na ngusum shila tukuiba nis odirida. Dirwa.
So really, basically about the question can be summarized under saying that when you have a conceptual mind such as an inferential cognizer, it comes down to a direct perceiver. So this seems to be the question. That it comes down to at the end you need a direct perception. It comes down to that. And what exactly that means, we should.
지산 투 그거바니 주다마와는 되바 인데시디. 주도 ranjuwa chi judama de zui de shagres da de chi di wa di do bayina de tar to na musum chi le tu gu re musum di ya ma chu ro chi le tu gu re ya na xin ri ma chu ba ya na ri ma chu ro chi le tu gu re de ri ma chu wa si ye de rang chi ni chu ba chi le ma chu ro le tu gu re se ne ta judo ma gi de bo di sung ge ni she de di tan ju gi ji shi go fa zan da de.
So this quote, so saying that conceptual mind actually relates back to a direct perceiver. It kind of comes down to or relates back to a direct perceiver. She didn't read the entire quote. Actually, the quote is, this is something asserted by the other tenet holders. So the other tenet holders, such as the Satantrika, the school, the holders of the Satantrika school, and so forth. So they say that, and this is not the Prasanghika view. So saying that a conceptual mind, it actually originally it kind of comes down to, I don't know how to translate this, like kuba means to meet. It meets or it comes down to a direct perceiver, a non-mistaken direct perceiver. Not just a non-mistaken direct perceiver, but a direct perceiver that is not mistaken with regard to the appearance of inherent existence. So this is something only the lower schools assert. This is not according to the Prasanghika system. So that a conceptual mind actually depends on a direct perceiver, that this needs to kind of, it relates to that directly, it kind of meets directly such a direct perceiver.
아니 제바디 무슨 투시에디 제바디 체마 임비 티시 자용디 니를 무슨 티시 체마 임비 티시기 토네 아니 신의 티시 자투에 어디 투시 기제.
So here kind of it comes down to a direct perceiver, or it kind of relates back to a direct perceiver. In which way? Well, deciding whether an inferential cognizer is a valid cognizer or not, one decides that in dependence on a direct perceiver. So one in dependence on a direct perceiver, one relates that back to a direct perceiver in the sense that one is able to say whether it's a valid cognizer or not by comparing it to a direct procedure.
那既然往西层嘛，看这下个是对吧？是对，嘛咯。
And then there's another
汪
question.
谢
Check
均美被汪谢雷给被谢巴迪千万人吧。
아니,看这下个是，
哦，
对吧？啊对。
So, like the other question is a faultless sense consciousness, is that a valid cognizer or not? So, this is your question. So, is a faultless sense consciousness a valid cognizer?
那都是的呢，你嘛听着就真的，你过东北有米给通过度，这个地推有吧，东北没有米给通过度，那地西中间呢，你过年着想那嘛通过民度，这个着那被我带过度，大概。
So, when I see with my sense consciousness,
大概他往西层嘛。
so talking about your talking about sense consciousness that is a valid cognizer, well, upon looking at the door, I see an empty space, and upon looking next to it at the wall, I see obstruction. So then I do walk exactly the right way. I walk through the door where there's space, and I do not walk towards the wall and hit my head. So basically, Geshe was saying, so this is the explanation, therefore, of a valid cognizer that is sense consciousness. Being able to identify
去撞到墙，如果他没有理这个根式，他自己去走到那个墙壁上去的话呢，那他的头就会撞到墙。这个就叫做无幻足跟所生识是两个意思。
这个面弄了过大概来嘛，我得打老些的，怎么没你的？
And on the example previously of someone bumping their head or hitting their head at a mirror, well, this is an example of a wrong sense consciousness because one misperceives
他身体是颠倒式，那因为身体是颠倒式，所以撞上走过去就会撞到了。
哦。
其实那个问题的关键，我第一次问老师那个名言有的3个条件的时候，其实老师的回答就比较像现在的回答，也就是说，他需要根据可以根据比量，然后根据你的先前经验 ，OK， 然后去判断这个名言量，它是不是名言量。可是老师前2天课程里头是说，他举了一个例子是蓝色的雪山。 好，就是说用了一个，就是说分别心可以是量，可是那个是量，它是因为关带成立的这样子的关系，所以它是量。比如说，某一个人看到，一个30岁的女人是妈妈，是儿子，是女儿等等，那这个东西事实上，我想要问的问题就是说，如果说这个东西你就可以说，因为它是关带的关系，所以它是量的话，那么怎么去成立？比如说我们都说，比如说圣无常或者是运无常，它必须要靠势力比量来成立。 那这样子的话，他最后不会又回到根式吗？他不需要根式来，我就是不太理解老师那天举那个例子想要传达的讯息是什么。那刚刚广论那一段话，其实我知道后面下部中他会说，闭制限量的关系，就是因为限量可以看到这个志向。 可是问题是呢，应承不承许说比量最终也需要到限量，可是他怎么样去解释这句话 ？Sorry
こちら笠間千葉市ケナラシュバです。그게그나기 강릉보기 빼디샤.
강릉보.
강릉보. 디 근도 제가 주마주 디 또바 라레고레 대두되는 소레스. 나한테 증명도 컨텐츠 소소나. 아니 단단하게나 송바디 세마 조야라 다소소 디 제바 세마 당 소소 양용 톤에 디 주투기레 스테르 소소.
你讲到哪里？
你说那个之前蓝色的山，然后现在老师讲这个例子就是透。
这时候。
比量，它的蓝色的山，它是因为分别心知道。
对，所以你现在为什么？
那你来我呢？讲一个清绿色，
还有听得懂一点中文，
因为我把 Chinese to say I can already answer.
念了也难过，就是马上就讲了。
I will say something and then you can see whether it's actually what.
可是谈到往些的，起码移民给这些的在呢， 아니 제바기 또바기 제시에 먹어 제 그두거랑 통하나 두고도 두고민도 왔으면 연구 돈에 채만이 뭐 어쩌지 송스 아니 가장님아 원시 채물 송수디 시에디 아니 또바 채만들 라데스레 스케치든지 시에 송스 카르레스 디로
So he's saying, well, your question seems to be, the question that the lady asked was, here when I talked about is a sense direct perceiver, is a sense consciousness, is it a valid cognizer or not, I said you don't need to depend on an inferential cognizer, you don't need to depend on a conceptual mind, just by being able to walk through this door in a proper way. So in that way I can decide whether my sense consciousness is a valid mind or not. I don't need a conceptual mind. But before I did say, on a different occasion, I said that for a sense consciousness to be valid cognizer or not depends on a conceptual consciousness. So isn't that contradictory? That the decision with regard to sense consciousnesses, whether they are they're correct or not, it all goes back to a conceptual mind. Isn't that standing in contradiction?
which did alingir tiba
So Diggle is saying it's just really difficult for me to say it, but anyway, that's the question, isn't it?
근데 파게 미시 체마 인버디 어제 제거래 얘기 디톤 파트너 동바도 파트너 두고도 디톤의 체마 인버디 어제 제거래 다 어제 제 차나요 저거 장자 요래 디 체마레 안 찍고 통해디 미시디 주시래 동바 통해디 주시래 인바마세 맞추리 차 요말 파게 동바 통해 미시디 찍고 통해 미시 니가로는 맞추리 차 준 요말 차 탐진의 추거래 다오나 안에 체마이 뭐 간지 시에게스 양조 디워지리 디 카르레스나 체마 이만 개제 말에 체마를 송술을 디워랬다 체마를 간지치는 체마를 송그래 아니 체마를 송술 카르레 센터 디워디 레비카블라 제자 안에 체마를 송술 리케지 시온데 아니 파게 미시 코라랑기 토네 안 체마 송단 디레 출단 디레스 여와체 균이도 왔어 메디자네 다 체마를 송단 디시죠 등에는 또바디 체마를 송단 디시죠 그래서는 또바디라 출단 디케지 시 양 체마를 송단 지지 인시에도 왔어 또바강 디지 시온데 아 미실든지 여와체에도 왔어 지선 또 또베강라 안에 체마 출바의 인딩이 차트 가서버다 유딜라 넘버 텐지도 출바의 인긴 체마를 송단지에 유해등이지 디시디 겹토나 아니 신의 디르제 당제다 미시디 바기 체마를 송단지 다고 차탐진의 추내양 체마를 가르센다 그 여바다 매바디 차주디 디토의 체마를 했습니다 남예디 딘디지 거는 샤야지 다 용거레스 딘디도 그래
체마 송단 계산이 페이지에나 그래 체마 송단
체마 송선 체마스는 밀루어로 다 밀루어 송단
미루와 인당
인당 유데라 다 긴도디 딜리고라 유데를 추이라 차로 추이레디 루에자고 차로로 양 밀루치라 거로
So previously when I spoke of an eye consciousness being a valid cognizer, I just kind of introduced, I just served as an introduction saying, well, I don't hit my hand when I walk through the empty door and so forth. This is just kind of introducing, introducing or identifying an eye consciousness roughly. But when I talk about now a valid cognizer, so whether it's a mistaken mind or not, so the fact that when I perceive the wall, the eye consciousness that perceives the wall, or the eye consciousness that perceives the empty space between the open door, well, these awarenesses, are they mistaken or not? Do they have an aspect of not being mistaken? Is there some aspect with regard to which they're not mistaken? We don't even have to talk about are they valid cognizers, but in the sense of what is their way of being valid cognizers as of like passing as valid cognizers, as of like passing as valid cognizers. So we have to address this question like they're mistaken, but they're also valid cognizers with regard to something. So this difference here, from the eye consciousness point of view, the difference is not clear. From the perspective of the eye consciousness, perceiving something correctly and also being mistaken, that is not clear to the there's no difference from the perspective of an eye consciousness. This difference becomes clear independent on a conceptual mind. So this aspect, from the point of view of this aspect, there is a mistake. From the point of view of this aspect, that is realized. So how the phenomenon is, in which way is it a valid cognizer? In which way does it realize, is it correct with regard to its object? And in which way is it nonetheless mistaken? So that is decided independence upon a conceptual. So this, therefore, this is what I meant with saying it goes down, it comes back to, or one needs to kind of look at the eye consciousness by previously relating it to a conceptual.
可是，在分别心上却可以，在分别心上可以解释说，就哪个部分来说是错误的支持方式，就哪个部分来说是正确的支持方式。那由于在分别心上可以去做区分的缘故呢，在分别心上有一个所谓的正确的量的支持方式可以去说明的缘故，所以透过这里我们就可以讲到说呢，用分别心的方式就可以解释那对境的支持方式怎么样是一个量式。那解释完对透过分别心正确的支持方式解释完什么叫量式的这个之后呢，再把它移到解释上面来说，那这个就是所谓的说，先透过分别心去成立它是量式，作为一个证人，然后再去说。那演示可能也可以是量式，当时老师要讲的是这个意思。
但养那么呢，养就俺这个去练习个嘞，但第背的个嘞还是他可上来的，但是中文背的，然后我们都写的的嘞。但看起背的啷上马达为呢，那个但兄弟写为那心情给写为呢，心给那册子练用的，心定义性那当去练册子练，的练不透呢，俺。这个的嘞呀，讨论没比就是讲起，东北的就是讲的，着想呢，这个可都着想过，是吧？但样他个东北有时的了，俺差不多有的就是的讲起，着呢，俺土呢出大街路还用过，土比就是怎么用，怕都虚伪呢，出怕用哎。但俺那起码可得是的，样研究就会练了，但个这的马当呢，样研究这些是练了，就是的练的在呢，但东北的这些些为呢。但这个东北通的人个，刚才提了对呢，东北的，但东北通的个老大，是东北的我那也是老了，但东北的有个的，然后刚才这个了对呢，头对呢，头接的，刚才这个了对呢，那东北的是，但前面上着的对呢，给这些我说是，对呢给这些的，但这对些的，东北个什么当当的通的些那么多，没些可能的对呢些的有什么的是。
So then another question that may arise, for example, and this example, it's a little difficult because we talked about previously finding a way in which one has a unique perception of something. I asked for an example of a unique perception where everyone has a unique perception of something, and finding an example, like an easy example, other than the water vessel and the piece of lead. So to find another example is difficult. But what we find in the scriptures, the explanation we find in the scripture, is that when a person abides in a concentrated state, where the mind abides in a concentrated state of mind, a specific kind of concentration, then due to that concentration, the eye consciousness that perceives the wall, where there's actually a wall, that is perceived as empty space. So a place that is actually obstructed is perceived as empty space, and the person is able to move through this wall without any obstruction. Likewise, independent on such a type of concentration, one can generate a concentration where empty space is seen as not non-tangible but as tangible. So therefore then the empty space is perceived not as empty space but as being obstructed, and one will actually, upon walking towards that empty space, one will actually be obstructed by it and literally fall back due to these kinds of concentrations. So then, how do we decide something is a valid cognizer or not? how can we actually decide if that takes place independent on such a concentration? So who is right and who is wrong? Which eye consciousness is correct and which one is not? And here we need to depend on a conceptual mind because the conceptual mind talks about something being such and such in relation to something else. In relation to the person who has not generated this type of concentration, in relation to that person, the eye consciousness which perceives space is a valid answer because they haven't gotten this kind of, they haven't generated this concentration and they can move through the space. And in relation to the person who's generated such concentration, the eye consciousness perceiving the space as tangible, that is also correct, that's also a valid cognizer, because in relation to that person, they are obstructed by the space. So the space is no longer really space, it's an obstructive phenomenon. So this is similar to the idea in relation to someone, in relation to a certain situation, something is so and so. This goes back to a conceptual consciousness. It is also only a conceptual consciousness, independence on which we can determine such. Similar to the example Geshe-la gave before of someone in relation to a certain person, this is a mother. In relation to another person, this is a daughter. This is a wife, and so forth.
디바지를 사자 동바지를 신동시 통도 신동들을 야가도 수요등이지 그런 추억이 답시죠 야가리 간도 샤인서 취재 되면은 미상만 찾아요다 가르치는 수지된소스 바나 동바간도 추억이 샤소스 다 디지디전에 남아 거는 잡으러다 신의 인도도 제시하면 되기로 캔사 미드지기 신동대 통과해서 말했어 그러기 신동통 신동가도 추격이야. 밑에서 신동마 통되잖아요. 추격이 반나가도 샤고 통으로. 그래서 딜레디 계속이라 아이들도 계속이는 수준대도 되시는 대로.
So there's a story of a lama who went to the Kanjimji, which means the he went to Mount Kailash, and when he was there, when he went to Mount Kailash, then he saw this empty space in front of him, and there was a tree. He saw this tree, and he took his shurva, he took his garment, his religious garment, and he put it on the tree. And then Geshe was saying probably to have a shower or have a wash or something. So anyway, then people approached this Lama and started prostrating towards him because they thought he's showing magical powers because he's kind of manifesting this religious garment hanging in the sky. So the Lama was a very honest person, so instead of pretending he had some magical powers, he was thinking, oh weird, they probably don't perceive the tree as I do, because they think this is due to a magical kind of magical power. So this shows his honesty, he's pretending he has magical powers, but he just perceived something that no one else was able to perceive.
저 되게 참아 당주를. 真的，你们这生意超安他们家这个之类的。第点学了真的。
So then, okay, so there are more questions, so let's do another day tomorrow. So tomorrow is the last day in terms of questions, and I also asked about the teachings in the Pure Round. Those will be after a few days.
正觉生觉日落是光明光明光明光明光明光明光明光明光明光明光明